The cold gymnasium floor pressed against Maya Chen's cheek as Victoria Sterling's designer heel dug into her shoulder blade. "Stay down where you belong, scholarship trash," Victoria sneered, her phone recording every humiliating second. But what Victoria didn't know was that the quiet girl she'd been systematically destroying had been hiding 7 years of deadly combat training, waiting for exactly this moment to unleash everything she'd learned about turning predators into prey. 3 months earlier, Maya had arrived at Westbrook Academy with nothing but perfect grades and desperate hope. Her mother, Linda, worked triple shifts at an all-night diner, sacrificing everything to afford their cramped apartment in the school district. Maya's plan was simple: maintain academic excellence, stay invisible, and earn her way to Stanford. Victoria Sterling had other plans entirely. The daughter of a tech billionaire, Victoria ruled Westbrook Academy like a medieval queen. Her perfectly highlighted blonde hair, designer uniforms, and casual cruelty marked her as untouchable. She had destroyed careers, ended scholarships, and driven away anyone who dared challenge her perceived superiority. The first attack came during lunch, swift and calculated. Maya sat alone in the cafeteria corner, reviewing chemistry notes, when Victoria approached with her 3 disciples in perfect formation: Brooke Hamilton, the senator's daughter with dead eyes and a fake smile; Chloe Bennett, whose family owned half the commercial real estate in town; and Jessica Park, a state championship athlete who enjoyed breaking things. "Excuse me," Victoria said, her voice dripping with manufactured sweetness. "Some of us are wondering if you actually earned that perfect chemistry score, or if teachers are going easy on scholarship students these days." The entire cafeteria seemed to quiet, sensing blood in the water. Maya kept her eyes on her textbook, knowing that any reaction would be used against her. "My grades speak for themselves." Victoria's perfectly manicured hand slammed down on Maya's notes, crumpling the carefully written equations. "Do they? Because my father sits on the school board, and he's become very interested in academic integrity lately, particularly regarding certain questionable students." Brooke leaned in close, her breath hot against Maya's ear. "Maybe you should consider whether this is really the right school for someone like you." Chloe's laugh was like breaking glass. "I mean, when you can't even afford decent clothes, how can you compete intellectually with students who've had every advantage?" Jessica just stood there, flexing her hands, making it clear what kind of competition she preferred. The threat was multi-layered and unmistakable. Maya gathered her things without responding, but she could feel Victoria's triumphant smile burning into her back as she walked away. The psychological warfare had begun. The harassment escalated with military precision. Maya's locker was vandalized with permanent marker calling her welfare queen and charity case. Her chemistry textbook disappeared from her bag, only to be found the next day in a bathroom toilet, pages dissolved and illegible. Anonymous notes appeared in her locker, questioning whether she was cheating, written on expensive stationery that reeked of designer perfume. Dr. Patterson, who had once praised Maya's exceptional understanding of organic chemistry, began watching her with suspicion during tests. Teachers who had recommended her for advanced placement programs suddenly grew distant and professional. The poison was spreading through the faculty, carefully administered by concerned phone calls from influential parents. But Victoria had made one crucial mistake in her psychological warfare. She never bothered to learn about Maya's afternoons. Every day after school, Maya walked 3 blocks through the industrial district to a converted warehouse that housed Sensei Torres's self-defense studio. For 7 years, since she was 10, and their apartment had been broken into while they slept, Maya had trained with religious devotion. What had started as her mother's desperate attempt to give her daughter basic protection had evolved into something far more dangerous. Sensei Torres had recognized something rare in the frightened girl who first walked through his doors, a natural fighter's instinct combined with an unbreakable will and the intelligence to use both strategically. Under his demanding instruction, Maya had earned her black belt in 3 different martial arts disciplines and competed successfully in regional tournaments, though she kept those victories as private as everything else in her carefully constructed invisible life. "Your technique is flawless," Sensei Torres observed after a particularly intense sparring session where Maya had systematically dismantled 2 advanced students simultaneously. "But your mind is clouded with anger and distraction. What troubles you?" Maya hesitated, then described the escalating harassment campaign. Sensei Torres listened without interruption, his experienced eyes reading the tactical situation with the precision of someone who had spent decades preparing students for real-world violence. "Document everything," he advised when she finished. "Build a comprehensive evidence file, create alliances with those who value justice over privilege, and prepare yourself mentally and physically. Bullies like this don't stop escalating until they're forced to confront consequences they can't manipulate or avoid." The second major confrontation came 2 weeks later, orchestrated with the precision of a military operation. Maya was leaving the library after hours when Victoria and her crew cornered her in the deserted east hallway, having clearly planned the encounter to avoid witnesses and security cameras. "We've been talking," Victoria said, her 3 followers automatically positioning themselves to block potential escape routes. "Some people think you're getting a little too comfortable here. Maybe it's time you remembered exactly where you stand in the social hierarchy." Jessica stepped forward, rolling her shoulders like a boxer preparing for violence. "We could help you with that understanding." Maya's body automatically shifted into the balanced stance Sensei Torres had drilled into her through thousands of repetitions, weight distributed for maximum mobility, hands relaxed but ready. But she forced her voice to remain calm and reasonable. "I just want to study and graduate. I'm not looking for any trouble." "See, that's exactly the problem," Chloe sneered, her voice carrying the casual cruelty of someone who had never faced real consequences. "You think you belong here. You think you can compete academically with students whose families have built this community for generations. But we know what you really are, a charity case taking resources from students who actually deserve them." Brooke pulled out her phone and activated the camera function, clearly intending to record whatever humiliation they had planned. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to admit on camera that you've been receiving inappropriate academic assistance. Then you're going to withdraw your scholarship application and transfer to a school more appropriate for your socio-economic background." Victoria's smile was pure malice. "And if you don't cooperate, we'll make sure everyone at this school knows exactly what kind of person you really are. Trust me, we have resources you can't even imagine." Maya looked at each of them in turn, her trained eye automatically calculating distances, reaction times, and potential weapons. Then she surprised them all by laughing, a sound completely devoid of fear or submission. "You have absolutely no idea who you're dealing with, do you?" Before anyone could respond, Alex Rivera rounded the corner, carrying an armload of newspapers. Alex was editor of the school paper and had been quietly documenting Victoria's harassment campaigns against multiple scholarship students, building a comprehensive investigation that would soon expose the systematic nature of the abuse. "Victoria," Alex said loudly, making sure the confrontation was clearly witnessed while pulling out a phone to record. "Having another one of your friendly conversations." The moment was broken, but the escalation was inevitable. Victoria's crew dispersed with obvious reluctance, but not before Victoria whispered with venomous intensity, "This isn't over, not even close." That night, Maya trained harder than ever before. Sensei Torres put her through advanced combat scenarios she had never experienced. multiple attackers in confined spaces, weapons defense, fighting while protecting others. The intensity was brutal, designed to prepare her for violence that went far beyond typical bullying. "The warrior's greatest victory is the fight that never happens," he said as they concluded with meditation and breathing exercises. "But the warrior must always be ready for the fight that cannot be avoided. Your enemies are escalating because they sense their power slipping. When cornered, privileged predators become most dangerous." Meanwhile, Victoria's campaign intensified with corporate-level sophistication. Cyber attacks crashed Alex Rivera's newspaper website and deleted weeks of investigative work. Maya's scholarship documents mysteriously disappeared from the guidance counselor's office. Rumors spread through social media about her academic integrity, carefully crafted to sound plausible while being impossible to disprove. The psychological pressure was designed to break Maya's focus and academic performance, creating the evidence Victoria needed to justify her narrative about undeserving scholarship students. But Maya had learned patience and strategic thinking from 7 years of martial arts discipline. She documented every incident, built alliances with other victims, and prepared for the inevitable final confrontation. The third encounter was different and far more dangerous. Victoria had learned from the previous failures and chose her moment with calculating precision. Maya was in the chemistry lab after hours, making up work disrupted by her sabotaged textbook. The building was nearly empty, security cameras conveniently malfunctioning in that wing, and the closest faculty member was 3 floors away. Victoria appeared in the doorway with all 3 of her followers, their formation military in its precision. "No witnesses this time," Victoria announced, her voice carrying the confidence of someone who had planned every detail. "No interruptions, no rescue." Maya activated the voice recorder Sensei Torres had given her and slipped it into her jacket pocket, the device designed to capture evidence while remaining undetectable. "You've been a persistent problem since the day you contaminated our school," Victoria continued, advancing slowly while her followers moved to strategic positions. Brooke blocked the main exit, Chloe positioned herself near the emergency door, and Jessica cracked her knuckles with obvious anticipation for violence. "Do you know how many favors my father has called in trying to get your scholarship revoked? How many donors he's contacted to express concerns about academic standards? How many board meetings where your name has been mentioned as an example of declining institutional quality?" Maya remained motionless, centering herself the way Sensei Torres had taught her, breathing steadily while calculating distances and possibilities. "But we realized something important," Victoria said, pulling out her phone and activating the camera. "Sometimes you have to handle problems personally. Sometimes you have to create the evidence you need." Jessica's smile was predatory as she flexed her hands. "This is going to be so much fun." "Here's what's going to happen," Victoria announced with the authority of someone accustomed to absolute obedience. "You're going to get on your hands and knees like the animal you are. You're going to crawl across this floor eating dirt and filth while admitting that you're worthless trash who doesn't belong anywhere near decent students. You're going to beg us to help you transfer to a school more appropriate for your kind." Brooke's laugh was like poison. "And we're going to record every degrading second of it. The video will go viral across every social media platform, tagged to your real name and college applications. No university will touch you after seeing what you really are." Chloe added her own venom. "Your mother's sacrifices will mean nothing. Your academic dreams will be destroyed. You'll spend the rest of your life knowing that your betters put you in your place when you got too ambitious." The demands were designed to be so psychologically devastating that Maya would be permanently broken regardless of whether she complied. If she submitted, the recorded humiliation would destroy her completely. If she refused, they were prepared to escalate to physical violence while claiming she had been uncooperative and aggressive. Maya finally broke her silence, her voice calm and steady despite the adrenaline beginning to flow through her system. "That's not going to happen. You need to leave this room immediately and stop harassing me and other students." The reasonable response was calculated to establish her attempts at peaceful resolution for legal protection, exactly as Sensei Torres had trained her. Every word was being recorded, creating evidence of her restraint and their aggression. Victoria's face twisted with rage at Maya's refusal to submit to her authority. The defiance represented a fundamental challenge to everything she believed about social hierarchy and inherited superiority. "You don't get to make demands here," Victoria snarled, abandoning any pretense of reasonableness. "You're nobody from nowhere, and it's time you learn to accept reality." Jessica lunged forward with obvious violent intent, her hands reaching out to grab Maya and force her into the degrading position they had demanded. The physical contact represented the legal threshold Sensei Torres had warned her about, the moment when self-defense became not only justified, but necessary for survival. Maya's response was instantaneous and overwhelming. 7 years of training under Sensei Torres's demanding instruction had prepared her for exactly this scenario, and her body moved with the fluid precision of someone who had practiced these techniques thousands of times under pressure. Jessica's attempted grab met nothing but empty air as Maya sidestepped with minimal effort, using her opponent's momentum against her with textbook precision. The counterattack came so quickly that Jessica barely had time to register what was happening before she found herself on her knees, her wrist locked in a submission hold that brought immediate and intense pain without causing permanent damage. Maya maintained the hold just long enough to demonstrate complete control before releasing her opponent and stepping back to a defensive position. 7 years of martial arts training, Maya said calmly, her voice carrying a new note of authority that none of them had heard before. 2nd-degree black belt in multiple disciplines. Regional sparring champion 3 years running. Sensei Torres' self-defense studio downtown. You picked the wrong target. The revelation hit Victoria's group like a physical blow, shattering every assumption they had made about Maya's capabilities and vulnerability. The quiet scholarship student they had been systematically tormenting was actually a highly trained fighter, capable of defending herself against multiple attackers with potentially devastating effectiveness. Jessica struggled to her feet, nursing her wrist and staring at Maya with a mixture of shock, pain, and newfound respect. The casual confidence she had displayed moments earlier was completely gone, replaced by the uncertainty of someone who had just discovered that their intended victim was actually a dangerous opponent who had been holding back. Brooke's smartphone trembled in her hands as she realized that she had been recording evidence of their own aggressive behavior rather than Maya's humiliation. The video would show Jessica attempting to physically force Maya into a degrading position, followed by a textbook example of appropriate self-defense that demonstrated both restraint and lethal capability. Chloe backed toward the emergency exit, apparently recognizing that the tactical situation had shifted dramatically against them. Her earlier bravado evaporated as she understood that they were no longer dealing with a helpless victim, but with someone who possessed the skills and training to protect herself effectively against any escalation they might attempt. Victoria stood frozen in the center of the classroom, her mind struggling to process the complete reversal of power dynamics that had just occurred in the space of a few seconds. Everything she thought she knew about social hierarchies and personal strength had been proven wrong by someone she had dismissed as inherently inferior. "Here's what's actually going to happen," Maya said, her voice carrying the calm authority of someone who now controlled the situation completely. "You're going to delete any recordings you've made. You're going to stop harassing me and every other student you've been targeting. You're going to publicly apologize for the lies you've spread about my academic integrity. And you're going to leave me alone permanently." The demands were reasonable but non-negotiable, delivered with the confidence of someone who had demonstrated the capability to enforce them if necessary. Maya's transformation from victim to victor was complete, achieved through preparation, strategic thinking, and the willingness to defend herself when peaceful options were exhausted. Brooke stammered something about their family's influence and political connections, apparently hoping that threats of retaliation would restore their lost authority. But the words lacked conviction, delivered by someone who no longer believed in her own power after witnessing its limitations when confronted by genuine strength. Your family's money and connections won't protect you from the consequences of assault, harassment, and attempted coercion, Maya replied, pulling out her own recording device to show them that their entire attack had been documented. This entire conversation is recorded, including your demands that I crawl and eat dirt while you filmed it. I also have months of evidence documenting your systematic harassment campaign against scholarship students. The threat of legal consequences was far more serious than any social embarrassment they might face. Maya's documentation would support criminal charges for harassment, intimidation, and assault, charges that even their family's influence might not be able to make disappear entirely, especially with federal civil rights implications involving economic discrimination in educational settings. Victoria made one last desperate attempt to salvage the situation, threatening Maya's scholarship and academic future through her family's connections to the school administration and board of directors. But the words rang hollow, delivered by someone who had just been definitively outmaneuvered by an opponent she had catastrophically underestimated. "My academic record speaks for itself," Maya responded with quiet confidence. "My grades are earned through hard work and genuine ability, not family connections or inherited privilege. Any investigation of my academic integrity will only confirm what everyone already knows, that I belong here because I've earned it through merit, not birthright." The confrontation ended not with violence or dramatic gestures, but with the simple reality that Victoria's group no longer possessed any credible threat to wield against Maya. Their campaign of psychological warfare had been based on the assumption that she was weak and isolated, assumptions that had been thoroughly and definitively disproven when they finally pushed her into a corner. One by one, Victoria's followers filed out of the classroom, their earlier confidence replaced by the subdued demeanor of people who had just learned an important lesson about the difference between inherited privilege and earned strength. Victoria herself was the last to leave, her face showing the confusion and fear of someone whose entire worldview had been challenged and found completely wanting. Maya remained in the classroom for several minutes after they departed, allowing her adrenaline to subside while processing what had just occurred. The confrontation she had been preparing for over months of escalating harassment was finally over. Resolved not through excessive violence, but through the demonstration of capability backed by justice and moral clarity. The next Monday brought a transformed school environment that reflected the positive changes her courage had initiated. Victoria was conspicuously absent from her usual position of power. Rumors suggested her family had quietly transferred her to a private institution in another state to avoid the legal and social consequences building around the harassment campaign. Jessica attended school with her wrist in a professional brace, avoiding eye contact with everyone and speaking to no one. Her athletic scholarship opportunities had evaporated overnight when college recruiters learned about her involvement in systematic harassment and attempted assault. The incident had taught her harsh lessons about the real-world consequences of privileged misconduct. Brooke and Chloe sat separately in the cafeteria, their previously unbreakable alliance fractured by fear of association with the group's spectacular downfall. Their families had received detailed documentation of their roles in the harassment conspiracy, along with legal warnings about potential civil rights violations and criminal charges if the behavior continued. Principal Morrison announced comprehensive new anti-harassment policies with external oversight, ensuring that family connections and donations would no longer influence disciplinary decisions. The changes were permanent, written into school policy rather than being temporary adjustments that could be quietly reversed when attention faded. Dr. Patterson personally apologized to Maya for questioning her academic integrity, offering her a new textbook and advanced placement opportunities that reflected her genuine capabilities. Teachers who had been influenced by the Whisper campaign now competed to provide additional support and recognition for her exceptional performance. Alex Rivera's newspaper investigation revealed the full scope of Victoria's systematic campaign, documenting similar harassment against 6 other scholarship students over 2 years. The comprehensive nature of the abuse shocked even veteran educators and prompted district-wide policy changes designed to prevent future discrimination. Maya's academic performance soared without constant sabotage and psychological warfare. Her chemistry scores reached new heights, earning praise from teachers and recognition that her excellence stemmed from genuine ability rather than any artificial assistance. But the real victory extended far beyond personal vindication. Other victims of Victoria's harassment began speaking out, supported by Maya's documented methods and Alex's investigative reporting. The evidence accumulated into a comprehensive case that prompted federal civil rights investigators to examine educational discrimination practices throughout the county. The confrontation in the chemistry lab became legendary among students, not for its violence, but for its demonstration that victims could become victors when they refused to accept injustice passively and prepared themselves thoroughly for the inevitable confrontation with systematic oppression. Sensei Torres was proud but unsurprised when Maya described the encounter during their next training session. "You used minimum force to achieve maximum justice," he observed with satisfaction. "You demonstrated the warrior's way, strength in service of righteousness rather than revenge." 6 months later, Maya received early admission to Stanford University with a full scholarship, her application enhanced by letters of recommendation that highlighted not only her academic excellence, but also her demonstrated leadership in promoting educational equity and opposing systematic discrimination. Victoria Sterling's fate served as a cautionary tale about the limitations of inherited privilege when confronted by genuine strength and moral courage. She had been expelled from 2 different private schools after attempting to run similar harassment campaigns, only to discover that her methods no longer worked in environments where administrators had been warned about her tactics and were prepared to hold her accountable. The quiet scholarship student who had only wanted to study in peace had become a symbol of resistance against privilege and prejudice. Her story spread through social media and student networks nationwide, inspiring others to document harassment systematically and fight back strategically rather than suffering in silence. Years later, as Dr. Maya Chen conducted groundbreaking research in neural regeneration therapy at Stanford's medical school, she would receive messages from students across the country who had used her methods to overcome their own battles with systematic harassment and discrimination. Her documented approach had influenced policy development at universities nationwide, providing frameworks for addressing privilege-based exclusion while promoting genuine academic excellence based on merit rather than family connections. The girl who had been forced to the floor of a chemistry classroom had not only survived, but thrived, proving that sometimes the quietest person in the room is actually the most dangerous opponent you could choose to face when they possess the combination of genuine capability, strategic intelligence, and absolute moral clarity. Maya's transformation was complete, but her impact was just beginning. The warrior within her had awakened not through hatred or desire for revenge, but through the recognition that some battles must be fought to protect not only yourself, but everyone who comes after you who might face similar challenges. True strength she had learned through 7 years of disciplined training, and one crucial moment of applied justice comes not from the ability to inflict damage, but from the courage to stand up when others cannot, and the wisdom to use that strength in service of justice rather than personal vendetta. Sometimes justice arrives not through official channels or institutional protection, but through individuals who combine genuine strength with strategic intelligence and the absolute refusal to surrender to those who mistake inherited privilege for earned superiority. And sometimes the greatest victories come not from defeating enemies, but from transforming the systems that create enemies in the first place.